All right, well, Bernie Sanders has defended his past comments on Cuba and Fidel Castro again, saying that although he did not like the authoritarian aspects of the regime, they did implement a literacy program once Fidel Castro got into office. Well, now, first off, describing Fidel Castro's rise to power as him just getting into office is a bit odd. He didn't just get into office, he slaughtered his way there. Now, it's true that the Baptiste regime that came before Castro was brutal and authoritarian as well, but it's worth noting that thousands were executed under Castro with no trial whatsoever, or at best, the trials were a farce. That was him, quote, getting into office, as Bernie Sanders so timidly put it. And then, of course, once he got into power, yes, he would imprison or execute anyone who criticized him or the revolution. He was a brutal dictator, plain and simple. Now, when Bernie Sanders says that you can't say Cuba was all bad because Castro implemented a literacy program, this seems like a pitiful attempt at softening people's natural feelings towards this dictator. And why does Bernie Sanders want to do that? Why does he want people to maybe forgive Castro a bit and not look so negatively on him? Well, one reason might be because the root of Bernie Sanders and Fidel Castro's ideology is the same. It's the labor theory of value, workers' revolution, dictatorship of the proletariat nonsense. I don't believe Bernie Sanders has said this outright, but every word he says in every debate and every stump speech is dripping with Marxian rhetoric. So because of this, he needs people to take it easy a bit on Cuba. The ideology is the same. It's just that Bernie Sanders likely understands that pure violent revolutionary speech won't fly very well in the U.S. among most people. So he needs to point out this supposed positive aspect of Cuba, but this ultimately lacks perspective. After all, the Soviet Union, North Korea, Venezuela, they all had literacy programs. They all have schools that they send their children to. Does this mean that we change our opinion on them in the least bit? Of course not. Why do you think that these places send children to schools anyway? Well, they need their worker bees. They need their children, the ones that survive the regime anyway, to become semi-competent adults to keep the country afloat. And you know who else sent their children to schools and got them educated? Well, Nazi Germany did. Does this mean that we start saying that the Third Reich wasn't all bad because of that? What kind of insane monster would say that? And how would Bernie Sanders react to someone saying something like that? He would rightfully call them out for it. Do we say that Pinochet or Mussolini weren't all bad because they had curriculum created for their kids? This is insanity. Bernie Sanders supporters have got to realize how much of a nutcase he is. And by the way, we have an educational system in the U.S., a gigantic public schooling system, and what has it given us? It's given us kids that are less and less educated as time goes on, and it has pumped out kids that can fall for Bernie Sanders' nonsense. So don't try and tie a country's worth to whether or not it has some literacy program or public schooling. By the way, I really doubt that the schools or literacy programs under Fidel Castro put a lot of emphasis on maybe free thought, free inquiry, or the value of questioning, researching, or thinking for yourself. So if you want to push this idea that Cuba wasn't all bad because they had a literacy program, well, that to me would be a lot like saying Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer weren't all that bad because they gave to charity a few times. It's meaningless drivel, just like everything else Bernie Sanders says. But that is all for now. Please like, subscribe, and share, and take it easy.